All right. I'm not necessarily going to give you a full-on introduction to 3D Modeler or an overview of it. I'll just mention some of the things that I think are important to recreate the same thing that we've been doing before. But it is, in my opinion, 3D Modeler, and this is something that I sort of like put, I keep pushing. So I haven't actually done it from start to finish until recently, like a creature or something within Modeler. So the learning curve is, once you pass certain concepts, it is non-existent. This is by far one of the easiest, most intuitive, and most most fun things to work on, especially in VR, that I've ever tried to prototype. I would say, like, even more than ZBrush in terms of prototyping, this is absolutely amazing because it just feels so intuitive, and you can see everything. You can manipulate everything. It just feels much more interactive when you have the chance to do this in VR. For prototyping, I haven't done this to a point that it has lots of details, and I don't think it will ever get to that point, same as ZBrush. That's why ZBrush is such a standard in the industry. So I'll show you later that the creature that I showed you with the long sort of fleshy horns, that's done in Modeler, but then I finished it in ZBrush. All right, so let's go ahead and continue building the kit here. I have the Quest 2, right? And as you can see here at the top right of my Adobe 3D Modeler, it says VR ready. So as soon as I put this on, I will be able to jump into the VR mode essentially with what I have here. Alrighty, so my controllers, the right controller is not connected. There we go. Where are we? Okay. All right, so if you've never used 3D Modeler before, you can use these right-handed or left-handed, doesn't matter. On my left-hand side, I have the tools to, if I press that little toggle on the top right, so I'm going to point it out with the little cube. So this thing right here, this one is to change between free mode, which is what I have here, and gizmo. So I'll bring in the gizmo. It's kind of like the gizmo, the transpose line in ZBrush. This other one right here, the one at the bottom, that's to bring in the palette, or like the tools and all of that. And this tool palette is the same thing that you see in 3D, in the desktop mode. And you also have the actions. So you have tools and you have actions. I like to have the tools and the actions in the same window. So I can click on this arrow here and I'll see windows and tools. So whenever I press that, whenever I am, that's the thing that is going to bring. And this looks like a little bit complex, but don't worry. It's such a simple software that everything makes sense. Everything is very intuitive. All right, so a couple of other things you'll see. Oh, let's do it on this side. So I'm going to point with this little thing. So this one right here is to size this cube. So if I press that and I move it around, I just change the size of the cube. Let me undo that, or let it back. Actually, let me just reset it. Okay. All right, so this is the cube, and this button right here is to resize it. Now, if I press this button right here, this is kind of like my shift key in ZBrush, is to smooth things out, but it's also my modifier. So that means that if I start, pressing this button to resize, right, and I've pressed this one, I can lock the aspect ratio. So I can do it like this. So this is especially useful if you want to maintain a cylinder, right? So that's one thing. You can also use the what's the name? The joystick. So this one right here, the one on the right-hand side, to up and down. So to scale that proportionally. So I can do this and then scale it up. So that way allows you to create things very quickly, right? The up and down on this side of the joystick is to scope in and scope out. I'll get to that in a second, because it's one of the most important things that you should focus on understanding to be able to work a lot faster. And then the left and right of the joystick on the left-hand side is to basically, undo and redo. So on the right-hand side, I can just go ahead and click on this trigger right here, and then I can do this. Pretty cool. And I can use the left-hand side to go back on undo, or right to go back. So that's pretty cool. Another thing, let's go back one. Another thing on this controller, this one right here on the bottom, is to change between adding to subtracting. There we go. So now you see the my controller is red, I can scale it up a little bit more so I can do it a bit faster. And pressing the trigger, I can just go ahead and start removing bits and pieces. Okay, this is like a pretty basic stuff, especially if you already know, this tool. But this is essentially what it's all about, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and start creating some stuff and show you what the scope in and scope out is, because that's one of the most important things. I want to press the palette to bring in my tools. Right now I have the cube. By the way, one thing that I like to do is I like to sort of hover here. I'm not pressing anything, just hover around here and then press my palette, because as soon as I do that, this thing is going to be locked in space, so I can look at it from different angles. But this is really cool because in the tools, you can also use something like taper, and you can taper that, and you can use rounded. And so I'm just using the tools, but also having a look at what this does, right? So I can use that, and then I can do this type of things. So there we go. That's one shape already. But this one has a lot of resolution. So what I can do is bring in the palette, and you see clay resolution. And that gives you, when you hover over it, that gives you some sort of grid. So I'm going to press down maybe a couple times. And then if I want to smooth this out even more, I can press my shift key, or the equivalent to my shift key, which is this trigger. And you'll see it just changes. Pressing this, it just changes to this thing. And if I press with my right trigger, I'm going to smooth this out, right? And if I go further away, you see that my brush sort of like gets bigger and bigger. You can also control that with the joystick, so I can scale that up, and that way I smooth with a larger brush. By the way, something that I should have mentioned, the manipulation of the scene, I can do that with either or of these hands that you see here. So if I press that, it just moves it like this, or I can move it like that. So this is really handy. I'll show you something cool. I'll go back to this, but if I select a different tool, so I've been using the clay tool, which is your default sort of tool. But if you go to the fourth one, so 1, 2, 3, 4, the wrap tool, this is your move brush. I like to use this elastic tool because it gives you more of a control way of changing things. But anyway, I'm going to select this one, right? So I have this sort of like ghost sphere that you can scale, right, to change the size of your brush. And that basically allows you to move and push things slowly. But what I like about this is that you can sort of hold this, right? And then you can hold the entire world and move it around. So you can press this and go like this, right? And that creates a pretty cool stuff. I mean, this is a bit too intense, but you can do the same thing with this. And what I like about the elastic tool is that you can move, and you see it sort of like has this elastic effect. So it's actually pulling and pushing from this area, right? All right, so I'm just gonna leave this one there as the first one. Okay, so now what I want to do is pull the trigger, not the trigger, sorry, what's the name? The joystick. So the joystick down to get out. So you see it just changes to the selection tool. And I'm going to use the right button to select it. And that way I can sort of, with the trigger, manipulate it. And as I hold it with the trigger is the selection tool, I can use the joystick to scale it down. And I'm just going to position it there. Okay. And then click to deselect. All right. So I have my first piece in there. Now, if I go ahead and press this and the tools select the clay, and I'm going to use the sphere. All right. By the way, if for some reason you have a sphere that looks like this, is because it remembers the last sort of modification that you did to that sphere. So if you want to, you can press the palette again, and if you click on the primitive again, is going to reset it. All right. And by the way, also, whenever you select a different primitive, you see that the dynamics here, or the things that you can use to change the size and the shape, vary depending on the primitive. So the sphere is pretty basic. All right. So now you'll see that this one is kind of like masked out, and this one is not. So if I do another shape, let's say something like this, I'm going to try to keep it simpler. Right? If I do something like that, maybe I want to remove some of this bit. So I'm going to increase my brush size and then switch with this button right here to the eraser, and then just erase some bits and pieces, right? And then from afar, just smooth this out, maybe changing the resolution again just by clicking on that, so that smooth things faster. And then I'm going to use my warp tool. So all the things that I just covered to create, this is kind of like a scapula type of thing. All right. Now, here is the important part. This is the holy grail of the 3D model software, the scope in and out. Once you understand this this idea of scoping in and out, I think the rest is super intuitive. You don't need to worry about anything else. So the idea is that right now we're editing this, so I cannot do anything with this one because it's sort of masked, right? So these are two separate objects or two separate layers, but right now we're just editing one. So if you want to go out to see all the layers or to manipulate all the layers, you can with this. I keep forgetting about the name, the joystick. Come on. So with the left joystick, you can get out. So to get out, you need to go down. This is the scope out. You see the little icon. One is to scope out, one is to scope in. So we're going to scope out. And now we can, you see that I don't have any tool. I don't have any clay tool. This is just the selecting tool. So I can select this one, scale it down a bit, just like I did before. Or I can select this one, reposition it. Let's put it here. Right, so this is the scope out. You're like in scene. I think it's called scene assembly because you have all your pieces and you can move them around and create your scene. Right, so that is the scoping. Now, if I want to go in and edit this or manipulate this, in fact, let's go ahead and duplicate that one. Just like in ZBrush, you can duplicate the same thing. So to duplicate, I'm going to select it first with this icon right here, and then I'm going to, with the trigger, the one that you use to move it around, I'm going to move it. But as I move it, I'm going to press the modifier. So I'm going to press once, and that duplicates it. Okay. So it's basically a combination of the two triggers. You move it, and then you click on it to duplicate. All right. So let's deselect that one. And you see all of them are available to us. I don't have any clay tool with me. So we are in scene assembly. So to edit this one, I need to, let's say, select it, and then click scope in. Or sorry, you don't need to scope in like that. I'm going to actually show you a simple way. So you just hover over. You don't need to select it. As long as it has the sort of blue outline, that means that that's the one that you're scoping in. So I'm going to hover over this and then press up. Sorry. There we go. Press up, and now we are inside this one. And you see immediately my tool changes to the last thing that I use, which is the elastic. So I'm going to go back to clay, make it a eraser, and do this, right? And then scoping in again, smooth that out, bring in my warp tool. So you see, this is basically what we did with ZBrush Sculptris Pro, but in a slightly different way. All right, so scoping out just so that we can see the scene assembly. Select that, push it over there. So I'm going to do a couple more just to show you, but I think you get the idea. It's pretty much the same thing. I want to show you a couple more tools that are really cool. So if you press the tool palette and go to the clay, this is one of my favorite tools. It's the one that I use the most for setting up the creatures now. So if you click on the spline, that one gives you this weird sort of shape, but oops. Let me just reset it. Okay, so I accidentally pressed the size. So basically, if you do this, you can create, very, very cool, weird looking stuff. This to me is already too specific for the kit that we're building. So I wouldn't do this because it's, we need to make it a bit more generic, like I said. But anyway, this one is really cool because if I bring in the palette here, you can change the tapering effect. So I like to set it to something like 50 or right in the middle so that the end or the beginning and the end are sort of the same. And then the pinching as well, like that. And what's cool about this is that obviously you can change the size like so, but this one works with the two controllers to change to elongate it basically. So if I press the size button here, you'll see that it sort of connects to my controller, wherever I am. So I'm going to press now. So it sort of goes back. So I can do these type of things. So this is great to create sort of like eyelids or a bunch of, I can do these type of things to make like a neck in a creature. Anyway, it's pretty handy. So what I like about this, let's go back and select it, is that we can scale this like so. By the way, you can also use the left-hand side joystick to scale this up and down, like the tapering. And you can also increase the overall size. So I'm going to do something like this. And then, all right. So that's pretty easy. And it's a really, really powerful tool. And I'm going to reduce the resolution quite a bit and then smooth the whole thing up. All right. Selected, scale it down, put it around here. So I'm going to start, you can arrange this in any way. This doesn't make any difference. I'm going to do one more just to give you some other tools that you can use. So I'm going to use let's say a torus, something like this. I'm changing the size with the button, by the way. So I'm going to do something like that, but I'm going to make it a bit more interesting with a bit of extra in there. And like I said, I sort of know what I'm doing with these things a little bit. So this could be the orbit for an eye. So I can use this. If I see this, I can say, okay, this is where an eye is going to be. So let's select that, reduce the resolution, scoping, and then smooth that out a bit. All right, selected, put it there. Okay, another thing we can do, actually, let's duplicate this one. If you remember, you select it, you hold the trigger, and then use the other trigger to duplicate. All right, and let's go ahead and scope in, hover over, up, we are in. I'm going to switch to the sphere, and I'm going to switch to erasing. By the way, this erasing is very handy. You just use the buttons, but if you want to, you can also go to the eraser tool here, which is the same thing. This is what I'm doing. The only thing is that the eraser has 3 other interesting things. So you have the splitting tool, which is really, really cool when you're doing more like hard surface stuff in this tool. And basically it just splits the object. So if I hover over this and click it, you see now I have 2 objects. So one is masked and the other one is not. So right now we're scoping on this half, but I can scope out and then scope in, and this is a different one. So basically I can take this now and move it. So I just split it. It's essentially Booleans, really. So I'm going to take this one and smooth that out, scope out, push this around here, and then take this one like so. And I'm going to show you the other Boolean stuff. So let's scope in. Let's go to erasing. The cropping one is basically going to keep only the thing that is within the object that I use to crop. So that's why it's called cropping. So if I do something like this, you see it just keeps that section. All right, so that's not too bad. Scope in, smooth that out. That's not too bad. Okay, so I mean, you can have a lot of fun creating a whole bunch of these objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these ones and import them into ZBrush, and we're going to combine them with what I already have to build the kit, basically. All right, what else can I show you about this before we finish? No, I think I covered pretty much everything in terms of building stuff. Like I said, this is not a full-on tutorial on how to create a full-on creature in Painter. In 3D Modeler. I will definitely show you some more tips later on. But yeah, this is basically it. You can do things with symmetry as well. I guess I can show you that a bit as well. So if you go to clay, I'm going to use maybe this thing. I'm going to click on. Actually, I'm going to make it first, just to show you kind of like the mirror and weld. Another thing I should mention though is, let's say if I try to make one click, but you see is like, that's not one, that's like 2. That's basically doing this, right? But if I want to have only one, and you want to make sure it's only one, and you don't have a steady hand like myself, I mean, I don't have a steady hand, you can just go ahead and bring this in and change this to a single. So if you press single, that would be only one. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you click one and then move your hand, it's only going to be one. So that's one cool thing. The other thing is lazy or steady. So lazy is kind of like lazy mouse. So you can press, and then you see you have that blue line. It's kind of like you're redlining the lazy mouse, and it sort of follows you around. So you can do things that is probably more control. That's cool. All right, I'm going to scope in, reduce the resolution, smooth that out, change to eraser, And I'm going to change my lazy mouse and do some kind of holes on that one. Again, just a random shape that it could work. Okay, so oh, I was going to show you the. Sorry, let's select this, duplicate it. So if I want to do some kind of like symmetry here, what I can do is select it, or scoping in, doesn't matter. But let's go ahead and simply select it. Sorry, let's go scope in, sorry. And here in the symmetry palette, you can click on symmetry, or you can click on repetition. Now the repetition is going to do it based on the world axis, and the symmetry is going to do it based on the local axis. So if I click on symmetry right now, I'm using the tool, sorry. Let's scope out, select it, and let's do repetition here. Okay, so you see it's on the other side. So I can bring this closer and it will work just like in ZBrush symmetry. So I can do something like this. Maybe this is kind of cool as maybe like a hip bone type of thing. That's not too bad. And then I can select it and I'm going to click on merge. So merge is going to weld the whole thing together, right? So now we have this piece, right? We can turn off the symmetry. So you see how it just changes from repetition to symmetry, because now the symmetry is on this, on the local axis. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to scope in, change the resolution a bit, and then smooth that out. So that's how easy it is to create these random shapes in a 3D modeler. All right. So what I need to do to export this is just go to File, click on Export, and you can apply different presets. So you can go straight from Paint or from this to Painter. But I'm just gonna, let's keep Painter as a preset. It's basically changing some of the parameters here, but I'm gonna go through them really quickly. The format, I want it to be FBX. You can also use USD, but ZBrush import USD based on one single file, even if you select all. So it's a pretty tricky. If you have multiple pieces, you'll have to do one every time. So I would recommend FBX. This is probably the best way of doing it. So like I said, nowadays USD is probably my preferred method of doing this, but I'll just recommend FBX for what we're doing specifically. So FBX, unit scale centimeters, that's pretty fun. Like this doesn't matter. Like we're gonna change things anyway. Topology, you can already make this into quads. So if you select quads, Modeler is going to run some sort of series measure type of thing when it exports. So that's also cool. I don't really mind triangles or anything, because you'll see that's all, I'm not worried about the topology. So if you want, you can do quads. If you have more complex shapes, I would recommend triangles. So I'll leave it at quads just to show you that it does a pretty good job to maintain the shapes and all of that. The adaptive factor, this is kind of like the adaptive slider in ZBrush series measure. So how much is going to adapt to the shape, or like the polygons to add in the different shapes. So in other words, it's going to add smaller polygons in the like spikes or tiny details, but we don't have anything like that. So the target polygon count, this is where you can define what is the total amount of polygons. So 60,000 is pretty good, although might increase it a tiny bit more. 85. It doesn't matter. This is arbitrary. If it doesn't work for you, you can just go back and export it in a different size. Now you can generate UVs, but it's completely irrelevant for the process that we're doing. So don't worry about this. I'm not going to generate UVs. Exporting hidden content, unless you have like intersecting bits. Well, this is not for intersecting bits. If you have any hidden objects in Modeler, you can export those as well. In my case, there's nothing. So positive transformal. So basically, to simplify it, I just use the Painter preset and I just choose FBX. That's it. If you want to change this, you can do it. It doesn't make a difference at all for the workflow that we're doing. So I'm going to click on Export Now, and let's go ahead and set this to my desktop for now. And I'm going to call these extra pieces. And yeah, it does it pretty quickly as well.